with Larry Flick on Sirius XM.
Radio is supposed to be in the person's mind.
Yes.
So old geezers like me, we keep it there. I've been called a relic holding on for dear life, and you know what? I'm not letting go. There you go. I'm Larry Flick. This is Sirius XM, and we are joined by Asa Butterfield, a lad who is so enthusiastic. He's got the best attitude of any young fella I've met in a long time.
Yes.
Walked into the room, smile, a good, strong handshake. You look happy to be here.
I'll take that, Larry.
Right on, my brother. And of course, she's an icon. And she's got blonde hair now. Gillian Anderson is joining us. So good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
It's really, really nice to have you back. They star in a new Netflix show that I've had the chance to see a little bit of. And I was just kind of going on and on and on about how it's been shot in places I know in Wales. The show is called Sex Education. And it is funny and cringy in all the right ways. It's the kind of show I wish I had when I was 17. Because it would have made me cringe, and it would have helped me because I was very much like Otis in that I was a little kind of like overexposed to sex, but a little kind of weird about it at the same time because I grew up in the 70s where it was like it was everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, before it all kind of went back into the closet.
Yeah.
I was raised around the free love era, and so it was a lot. You know, and then you add Catholicism and all that other stuff, and so you just get really kind of
Messed up.
Yeah, so this is a really great show. Aside from being wonderfully entertaining, it actually does a very good job in kind of rattling the cages of young people and older people. So, Gillian, I'm curious to know, what was the initial allure? I mean, she's a great character.
I don't get the opportunity, or at least people don't think of me instinctively as being a comedic actress. I don't get offered a lot of comedy, and so when somebody does, I pay a lot of attention, and I too like the character very much, and I find her endlessly entertaining and complex. And I couldn't stop laughing out loud as I was reading the episodes, which is always a good sign.
Yeah.
And so that's initially what drew me to the script.
It had to be. Did you find that you were using using acting muscles that you don't normally get to play with when you're acting? Because you do play lots of dark roles, lots of very serious roles.
Yep.
You have a strong command on screen. And you do here, but it's different because she's a little, for all of her command, she's a little hapless.
Yeah.
As well.
That's a good word for her.
Which is what I really like about her.
Yeah, me too.
And I think I like that about her because I'm not used to seeing you that way.
Yeah. Well, Jean is a sex therapist.
Right.
And she lives alone with her teenage son, Otis, played by Asa.
That's me.
Yeah. And so Otis has grown up being exposed to all of the paraphernalia and
all the paraphernalia,
Yeah.
everything
all
you
of
can
it.
think of.
I mean, this kid has seen
it all.
a lot. He's seen things that a 55-year-old hasn't seen.
It's true.
It's a remarkable
It's true.
thing.
And so Otis himself is a reluctant expert on sex.
Yeah.
And so when he goes through his, in the process of going through puberty himself and coming to terms with where that exists in his life and making sense of it, he decides to go into business with a fellow student of his, being a sex therapist to his fellow high school students.
This is the best plot point. It is the best plot point because, first of all, it unleashes the possibility to really find out what he's thinking, but also it shows how much like his parents he really is without really spelling it. It's very clever. And
but at the same time, he finds that in the process, he might potentially need some therapy himself because
which is always the
He
case.
has a lot of his own issues.
Yeah,
but that's always the case, isn't it?
Sure.
You know, the experts are usually the ones who need to be healed first.
Oh my God! Well, my character Jean is an expert. She's a professional sex therapist, and yet she is so boundaryless and inappropriate in the amount of information that she both gives to her son and expects from her son. That she that is where the humor is with Jean, because she just can't help herself.
So here's the funny thing y'all can't see because it is radio, so I want you to get a picture in your mind. Poor Asa Butterfield is actually blushing right now in the studio.
You wish.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Come on. What was the most...
What is he going to ask?
What was the funniest part of this process for you? I mean, I could imagine all of it's a lot of fun. I can imagine that some of it's uncomfortable because, you know,
it's a whole spectrum of emotions making this job. There was a lot of fun moments, a lot of laughter, a lot of crying, a lot of very awkward scenes.
When did you squirm the most?
When did I squirm the most? Well, this was on this job. I ticked off my first masturbating scene, and I have a few of them in the show.
Yes,
and they don't all usually sort of go to plan necessarily, but that was interesting for me, as you can expect. I mean, it's not usually not something you do when there's a whole room of people around and a camera in your face.
What do you... Wait. So take us into your life.
Okay.
You wake up that morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a shower, you brush your teeth. You know what you're going to do that day.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I was actually quite excited. Not gonna lie.
Were you?
I was excited.
I might call in sick
partially
that day.
Because
I might call in sick.
We had these... a few of these scenes, which we didn't end up doing until right toward the end. They all got pushed back until I had 3 wank scenes in the space of about 2 weeks.
Well, you have a very nice director because, you know, usually they put that stuff at the beginning of the
first day. They do it first day.
Sex scenes, killing scenes, and death scenes are usually the first things shot.
It was very thoughtful.
So they
give me time to warm up.
To use a term you've heard before, they edged you out.
Yeah,
they made you wait.
They did, but it was worth it. And actually, I mean, my character, the wanking scenes, my character has a lot of difficulty with sex and approaching that, and
wanking specifically.
And specifically wanking, and pretty much anything to do with sex, he really makes him squirm. So these scenes, I'm not enjoying it at all. So it's actually quite funny to I think if I were enjoying it, it'd be a lot weirder to have people watching me do that. But I think the fact that I find it so difficult, and it is actually very funny, and we use some very clever camera tricks with them and some special effects to make to really make it stand out.
Hang on, let's clarify. What stand out? So your experience and your psychological challenge with the wanking itself is what really needed to stand out. So the camera was pulling back
it
down
draws the
a
audience
long
into
hallway.
Yes,
that's what he's
experience.
referring to.
It's not going to get wildly well.
No, but then his mom. I mean, an example of Jean, my character, and her inappropriateness would say to him, I don't remember quite how it goes, but she says to him, I've noticed that you've been pretending to masturbate. And I wanted to know if you wanted to talk about that. I mean, could you imagine having that conversation with your mom?
I don't think my mother to this day knows that I masturbated. That's how repressed and oppressed we were in my family. So,
I mean, it's a hard conversation to have with anyone,
with
let alone
anybody.
Your parent.
But then her being a therapist, he says, Mom, could you just stop? And she's like, well, I'll stop when you stop creating performative situations that you want me to observe. So she takes it and she throws some psychological jargon at it, hoping that somehow that will make it easier for him to
Gillian, you had way too much fun playing this character.
I did.
I feel like she's still sort of slipping into her a little bit. Just a tiny bit. No, it does. It seems like it seems like you really savored this opportunity.
Yeah, definitely.
And it seems like the two of you. How do you build that kind of comfort as actors when you're playing a lot of squirmy scenes together?
Well, we did. I mean, we didn't. Our squirmy scenes were very different than the other squirmy scenes that take place in the show, and so. But
but they're still pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, but our relationship started out very naturally. I mean, it just we kind of fell into a rhythm and a familiarity very easily.
What's it like for you, Asa? How old are you?
21.
You're 21. Very young.
Thank you.
And you look about 15.
I'll take that as a compliment too.
I say it as a compliment.
As much as I'd love to have a beard like yours.
It'll come.
It'll come.
Trust.
I
actually had a face just like yours when I was 21.
Oh, you did? Oh, that gives me hope. That gives me hope.
You just have to age a little bit.
Yeah.
Live a little life.
Yeah.
How? I mean, we're having a good time, but this is a very vulnerable thing and very vulnerable character you're playing. In order for it to work, it has to be more than funny. It actually has to have some soul. So you have to be a lot more available than just like, okay, I'm going to have an awkward wank today. You have to really kind of think about it because it works. There's an honesty in your performance. Tell me about exposing yourself that way in this kind of a character.
Well, I think this goes for the whole show. It's the experiences these kids are going through are all things that we went through, that I went through, that everyone can relate to. So when he's struggling with those decisions and he's struggling to talk to a girl or he's struggling to talk to his mum, that's all things which sort of sit quite close to home, I think. And I think that's why you can watch it and people can watch it and really relate to it. And so it was kind of channeling that. And I think as we said before, me and Gillian very quickly kind of had this, got this relationship which felt very natural, felt very, the mother-son dynamic I think is kind of universal. And my mum, funnily enough, is a psychologist as well. So there was an element of that which felt very real for me. So I think, I don't know.
But there's a depth to his performance.
There's an absolute depth to it.
Such
yes.
a sweet depth to it.
I think there's a depth to everything that's on the screen. That's what makes this a real show as opposed to being
gratuitous or
a clowny show.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't think that there would be a reason for us to sit here and have a conversation if it was just a clowny show. You know, I mean, I think that the soul that you as actors bring to these characters and the honesty. You know, listen, when I was your character's age, and this is why I say at the beginning, I wish I had this show when I was younger, because I didn't talk to my friends about sex. I don't know what your experience was or what your experience was, but even though I was raised in the whole free love era, I was raised in an Italian Catholic home in the Bronx, New York. You didn't talk about sex. You didn't walk around with your shirt off, going in and out of the shower. So there was a lot of shh. So to watch this show, I'm thinking this is going to be a very powerful thing. It's going to be very funny. And sometimes the best way to get to people is through laughter.
Open them up, make them...
especially young people. Because young people are going to be like, ooh,
well, also
laugh.
it's quite confusing these days, I think, for young people, because there's so much that's out there. There's so much that's accessible through our phones and is that we can jump into in a second by Google searching. It's just too much information. So to have a platform where the conversation is kind of a safe arena to learn about things, to see other people having awkward conversations, situations, struggling with the emotions, the responsibility, in such a frank, honest, and kind of unflinching way, is hopefully will be a positive, you know.
I think it'll be a huge positive, and I think actually the thing that I also really like about this show, and again, the show's called Sex Education, everybody. It's on Netflix. Going to be on Netflix in January. Is that it is mother and son, not father and son. because I think that there's a lot to unpack with Mom being the way she is, because it's trickier to unpack, right? Think about, like, you know, how, I don't know what your upbringing was and your relationship to sexuality was, but it had to be a lot more fraught than it was for the young fellas around you when you were growing up as a young girl. So what was that like for you? What did it make you, how did you find yourself thinking about sex as you're having fun? Because she's nothing but fun.
Yep.
But she's the result of gender politics. That's what I think, at least.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you don't get a woman like her without a whole life of gender politics that's been fraught and filled with, like, women don't talk about that. Good girls don't talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, what was that like for you?
I mean, for me, in my own experience, it's interesting because I don't have a lot of memory about it. I do know that I grew up with a huge amount of shame, and you know, I spent most of my high school years either in a sweater and a combat coat, even through the summer, or with a mohawk and piercing and going to punk.
It's like human scaffolding, right?
Yeah.
So what was it like to say the things that she says?
Well, I mean, in the process of my life, I actually somehow have become incredibly open and fearless and shameless about all things related to sex. And so it's actually, you know, but it's taken a lot of work. I've been in therapy since I was 14 years old. You know, it's taken a lot of work, but I'm quite open about everything, and so you know, it was fun to be able to play a character who was even more open than I am necessarily, you know, sometimes detrimentally, but certainly that is as free and guileless and hapless, as you said, as Jean is. And so she doesn't, the only hang up Jean seems to have is in her intimate relationships with men and longevity of that. You know, she is quite promiscuous and proud of her promiscuity, and is afraid of commitment post-divorce from her son's father. And so, you know, she's complex and a lot of fun.
It's an interesting time for this show, because in another time she'd become a cautionary tale, right? Something would happen, and, you know, the worst that could happen is she gets her feelings hurt in 2018 because of the way the show's written and the way you play her. And I think that that's a really important thing for people to see. I mean, honestly, I don't mean to get overly serious. It is a fun show, but I do think that there's some really important stuff happening here. And if you really spend some time thinking about it, this show couldn't happen 5 years ago without it having to play out differently, without there having to be a redemptive moment, or what people would call a redemptive moment.
Yeah.
You know, I celebrate this show because it is what it is. It's an unapologetic, unashamed show.
And all the characters have, they're not perfect. None of them are perfect, and they all have. Even Otis he's got a streak to him which is flawed, and everyone has these struggles that they're dealing with. And that's it's
great stuff, y'all. Congratulations.
Thank
you.
Congratulations again. The show is called Sex Education. It goes up in early January on Netflix. Asa Butterfield, Gillian Anderson,